Right guys, welcome back to Formula 1 news. The drama at Ferrari continues as they look to fix their troubled Formula 1 car in 2025. The floor upgrade that they plan to bring for Bahrain, reports say that Fred Vasseur is not so sure that it's a good idea to deploy it now and actually prefers to focus on fixing the balance issues before they bring an upgrade to the car. Hamilton and Leclerc also seem to be on different pages when it comes to what it's required to fix the machine this year, with Leclerc reportedly going his own way, with Hamilton sticking with the guns of Loic Serra and the technical team. What is going on behind the scenes there at Ferrari, and if this continues, how long can they continue with this project before switching their focus fully to 2026? Very much interested in your thoughts in the comments. Hit the like button if you enjoy. Subscribe if you're new as always. I greatly appreciate loads of new support over the last few days. Appreciate you guys as ever. Starting with Kimi Antonelli. Yes, he is one of the first rookies in a long time to actually be driving a competitive machine, but his performances so far have been very commendable. Thought this is pretty interesting. Of all the drivers in the history of, well, 60 years of the sport to have finished in the top 6 in their first 3 World Championship races, Jackie Stewart was one in 1965, Hamilton was the next in 2007, and Antonelli has done it here in 2025. This is also interesting. Look, I don't want to pile the pressure on Antonelli, as it were, but I don't think that really matters anyway. The kid can live up to the pressure. He had massive pressure on him coming into this season and has been pretty stellar so far. I think George definitely has to watch his back as the season goes on. I think, Kimi will make some mistakes, but he even said after the Grand Prix that his final stint on the hard tyres, where he was pushing really hard, he learnt a lot about the car, a lot about where he can push it, where he has to be more reserved, and I think that's an exciting possibility for the future. Of course, he did secure the fastest lap as well during that Grand Prix in that stint, and he becomes, well, the first driver in quite a while to achieve that in their first 3 Grand Prix. The previous 2 drivers to do it, well, the previous 3 drivers to do it, have all gone on to win the World Drivers' Championship at some point. I would presume that Antonelli probably will be a world champion at some point, given his talent. When and with who, that is a totally different question, but I certainly wouldn't be surprised. Of course, look, who knows how a career plays out. Charles Leclerc may never be world champion, despite clearly having the talent to do so. But speaking of rookies, there was an interesting story emerging today on Franco Colapinto, because we saw him yesterday doing some testing for Alpine at Monza, and Paul Aron was in the car today doing some testing as well. Now, there were reports suggesting that Colapinto's lap times were 7/10 faster a lap than Paul Aron in their race pace runs, which is like, wow, this is a pretty big deal. Now, what you'll tend to find is that whenever numbers from testing come out publicly, they have usually been released by whoever stands to gain the most from them being released, because there was then discussion shortly afterwards from Thomas Maher that actually these numbers were simply, not really relevant, because look, it's testing, different track temperatures, different power unit settings, different stages of track evolution, no comparable running. So I'm sure that the teams will look at the data, they will try and get some sort of comparable numbers, but maybe Colapinto was 7/10 a lap faster than Paul Aron, but maybe his power unit was 4/10 a lap faster and he had 3/10 of, track evolution in his favor, right? Who knows? But apparently the number probably was 7/10. It's just there are so many other factors in play. But, you then get reports, people saying, wow, Colapinto's cooking, right? Look at him go, driving the Alpine around Monza and smoking his, young teammate, who's also talented, Paul Aron, for sure. He's been good in some junior categories now for some time. But you've got to wonder whether, some members of Colapinto's camp wanted this information to be out in the public domain, just to put some extra pressure on Jack Doohan with a difficult weekend in Suzuka. Was in the wall. George Russell was kind of quizzed on the safety involved with the DRS, of course, was still open when Doohan lost the rear of the car and ended up in the wall. Look, that was driver error as far as I'm concerned. He didn't close it for various reasons we discussed over the last few days, and Russell says, yeah, look, it's just part of the job. Now, I will say, we'll get to this in a second, but we're going to talk about 2026 as well and the relevance of that and the active aerodynamics. There was an article here that came out discussing the dirty air and why it's a big deal, certainly nowadays in 2025 compared to what it was maybe 2022. The dirty air was less of an issue, but it's become worse and worse over the last few years, as we all know. But apparently the Doohan crash has actually created a bit of a discussion around the concern of active aero. So active aerodynamics are going to be on the 2026 cars as it stands, effectively because there's so much hybrid power, there's so much electrical power in the hybrid engines that by the end of the straight, let's say in Monza, it's likely that the engines will simply have run out of electrical energy to deploy. And that means that they need to design the cars to be slippery on the straight and then give more downforce in the corners so that the engines can cope. So to deal with the, frankly, poor engine regulations, as far as I'm concerned, and many others, even in Formula 1, I think would agree, they are having to bring in active aerodynamics, so literally the front and the rear wings of the car will move. The only active aero we presently have in the sport is DRS, effectively. It's, kind of active aero. I mean, it is technically. You press a button, the flap comes up. It's going to be a bit different in 2026. Basically the flaps will move between different positions, kind of like DRS, but more, let's say, wholly on the car, on the front and the rear wing. And this has been a solution to deal with the engine problems, but also creates some safety concern because let's say the active aero doesn't move properly, right? And there's technical issues in making that happen, which become more complicated when you're not just talking about DRS and there are multiple things going on with the car aerodynamically. If you have less downforce than you think you'll have, crashes like doings can be far more likely than we might otherwise like. So I think that might be one of the things that's creating further drama around these 2026 regulations right now is what happened to Duel a couple of days ago. Now look, driver error sure, but it does raise some concerns about what could happen if active aero was to malfunction at those type of high-speed corners. This weekend in Bahrain, there are going to be, I think, 5 rookies in the cars during FP1. So we've got, if you guys can just about see it, but I'll read through it anyway, Dino Beganovic is going to be in Charles Leclerc's Ferrari. We've got Frederic Vesti, who's going to be in the Mercedes. Drugovic is going to be in the Aston Martin. Hirakawa is going to turn up in the Haas, which is pretty funny because he just drove the Alpine last time out. And then Luke Browning is set to be in Carlos Sainz's Williams. So that's how that looks all over there right now. But let's quickly touch on 2026 because you guys may know about the rumours of the returning to the V10 power units, whether that's going to happen at some point. Now, they need a supermajority, as in 4 of the 5 engine manufacturers would have to agree to change the rules. We're talking Mercedes, Ferrari, Audi, of course, have come in, Ford, effectively, with Red Bull powertrains, and then Honda. Those are the 5. Cadillac, General Motors may come in at some point soon. I've mentioned the problems at length over the last several months with these 55-45 hybrid engines, 55 internal combustion, 45 power unit electrical side. Currently, that ratio looks like 85-15, basically, in the current power units. That will change. There's lots of talk of what they might do about it. The article went into some detail on which teams are in support, which teams are not in support. The concern for Ferrari and for potentially Red Bull as well is that they seem to be in favour of going back to V10s or at the very minimum changing the split between hybrid and ICE to become kind of more similar to what it is today. That implies that neither of those teams are probably especially confident with the development of their hybrid component of the engine, and they would like to keep it more similar to what it is presently and move back to a V10 naturally aspirated on sustainable fuels as quickly as is possible to do. The reality, however, is to change the regulations to this extent would be a massive deal. The article mentions all of these teams have committed $300 million into these power unit programs. To change the rules, I mean, the lawsuits are going to be, left, right, rhubarb, right? It's going to be all over the shop. So that's a problem for the FIA. The trustworthiness, if they were to change their approach, is going to be a big problem. And you need 4 of the 5 manufacturers to agree to it happening anyway, which is unlikely as it stands because, Audi probably don't want to move away from the hybrid PUs because what else are they going to do? I mean, they came in and Honda came back in to develop these engines, even if they're not doing a great job compared to where everyone seems to think Mercedes presently are. So it's a big issue which is going to continue going behind the scenes. But we're going to leave it there for today because we have more pertinent things to discuss for the Bahrain Grand Prix. Is it going to be Red Bull back to reality this weekend and McLaren back to reality because, this is a circuit where overtaking is more feasible than it was around Suzuka for sure? George Russell continues his kind of doom and gloom mentality and says, I don't think we have seen the best of McLaren yet. When we go to Bahrain and Saudi, when it's going to be hot, 35 degrees, I think that's when we are going to see those guys excel. So who knows really? Does Russell know any better than anybody else in terms of how well their car might perform in those temperatures? We know that the Mercedes tended, certainly last year, to prefer the cooler conditions, and one of the reasons why Japan was not an easy win for the McLarens really was because tyre degradation was not a factor. I do think that if tyre deg had been a factor, maybe if the first sector wasn't resurfaced and the tyres were getting chewed up really a little bit more by the first sector than they were this time out, McLaren may well have overtaken Max and he may have had no answer because the pace advantage required, we're talking a second-ish a lap at the time, that was not possible to accomplish because the tyre deltas were simply not there. Whereas on another circuit, maybe if it's hotter conditions, the tyre degradation is more substantial, then we might see McLaren's seemingly underlying advantage come into play. Although I will say, Norris is continuing his train of basically saying that we don't have a car advantage, or like trying to play it down as much as possible. And I appreciate that this is just how Formula 1 is, but I know that, it doesn't rub some people the right way, if you want to put it like that, when Lando is saying, oh, well, in Bahrain, there's slow speed corners there, they'll play to Red Bull's strengths over ours. Is he right? I mean, maybe, I don't know. But I kind of, look, the reality is that McLaren is the fastest car. Nobody's denying that. And neither are McLaren or Norris denying it themselves. But every weekend you've got these statements from Lando saying, oh, well, Max is maybe going to win again because the car suits the track or whatever. And there was even this comment, right? So when they were talking about Charles Leclerc's performance, especially in China, when he didn't have the end plate on his front wing, and Oscar said, people forget Charles' race in China with half a wing. If anyone else tried to do that, they would have boxed pretty quickly. So I think Oscar giving Charles credit for his performance in the circumstances, whereas Lando takes a slightly different approach and says Charles was not that much slower. I mean, there was a bigger gap. I think his second stint on hard was just as quick as us. We didn't drop him at all, which is, seems to kind of imply that the performance advantage of the McLaren isn't as big as maybe it appears. This is a classic tactic for World Championship favourite and Championship leader, sure, but I know that it's going to continue causing debate in the community, especially when the number we think to overtake the car in front in Suzuka, well, Andrea Stella said that it was 0.8 of a second a lap. We heard Mark Hughes from the race say that it was 1.4 seconds per lap. My guess in the video after the race was like a second a lap, so it's probably in that kind of ballpark anyway. And it's kind of crazy, right, that in 2022, 0.2 a lap was enough of a pace advantage, given the dirtier wasn't so much of a big deal, to overtake the guy in front. Now it's more like 0.8 of a second, and that maybe isn't just Japan, it's going to affect other Grand Prix as well. Quickly on Verstappen, what a weekend of course for him. Yuki Tsunoda had a tricky time. I think, Yuki, obviously he should have done better in qualifying, I think nobody's denying that, but he was pretty good apart from the one lap in Q2 that, he made a bit of a mistake, went in a bit too hot into turn 1, turn 2, and after that it was really an uphill battle from there. So, it happens, and in the Grand Prix, it was obviously a big challenge for him to make any places because it just was very difficult to do so. So what Marco says, it was fine. I think Yuki is going to get the whole season, but yeah, we'll see in Bahrain. I think that's going to be the key test. People, I think, are looking at Tsunoda's performance in Japan and saying, this guy's going to be no better than Perez, no better than Lawson. I'm not sure, I still want to believe that that's not going to be true, but look, we'll see over the next few weekends how he adapts to the car. Max, of course, will be much more satisfied after the win that he was before. Red Bull apparently turned their car upside down on Friday night, changed loads of things to get it into a far superior competitive window where Verstappen was able to take advantage, stick it on pole with a magical lap, and then fend off the two McLarens during the course of a Grand Prix. This may keep Max at Red Bull. That is the bottom line, because we've talked about it a lot. Mercedes, Aston Martin, if Red Bull aren't delivering, Max is going to go. And honestly, I think this may be a necessary thing for the sport. I am genuinely concerned about the possibility of Max leaving Red Bull to go to Mercedes, and Mercedes having by far the best power unit next year, which is the current rumour, and Max being absolutely untouchable for the next few years. I don't mind Max winning loads of championships. What I do want is a competitive championship, and I do fear that Max to a Mercedes next year could be could be 2023, 2014, 2015, all over. 2015 is probably the better example, all over again. So yeah, we'll see. Maybe this weekend could be a big deal for even the competition in future years. Because okay, Max, great, stay at Red Bull. Please stay. You know what I'm saying? Like the other teams may be in that position if the theories are true about 2026. Of course, Max will still be very ambitious that he can achieve the World Championship this year. We know that there's going to be a change on the front wing flexibility in Barcelona. Horner says it's quite a significant one. It will be interesting to see how and who it affects. There are no guarantees. Red Bull obviously hope, and I think they believe, that it will slow down McLaren. Whether it will is another question. McLaren don't seem to be too worried, but they weren't too worried about the rear wing flexibility thing either, and that does seem to have affected their straight line speed performance to some degree. But let's talk about Ferrari, because this team never gets old. They're currently 4th in the Constructors' Championship. It's not looking so good, and they have a new floor that they will bring to Bahrain. But will they actually bring it to Bahrain? So this is the big question that has been emerging today as to what exactly is going on there behind the scenes at Ferrari. Clearly, they've got problems with their car they didn't anticipate. Frankly, it was inevitable that they would have some issues to go through, but the issues are frankly quite severe. Apparently, according to the article that De Kessa put together and the guys at Formula Uno, as they are now, like Auto Racer Italia, they mentioned that apparently the car is being run 3mm higher than they would want to. And that 3mm is losing them, 20 points of downforce, whatever that means. And, it's causing them a significant percentage of their performance disadvantage. It's becoming because they can't run the ride type where they want it to, otherwise they'll get disqualified. And that is clearly a pretty major oversight. Now, Fred Vasseur, after Japan, not a great weekend for them. Leclerc was 4th, Hamilton was 7th. They did as well as they realistically could, I think, in the scenario. But still, they say that they can fix the balance issues. There are balance problems with the car that they believe they can solve, but they have a new floor right here and ready to go. But this is the big rumour today, coming out of the Gazzetta actually, that the new floor is ready, but they're not sure they want to use it yet because, well, the aero team wants to put it on the car. They think it's going to be better. The feeling is that this will be a key factor in helping that car perform as they believe that it can. However, Fred Vasseur and Loic Serra, their top technical director they brought in for Mercedes, close ally of Lewis Hamilton for many years, reportedly are not so convinced that they should, preferring to try and solve the issues with their balance before they then stick the new floor on the car. Very interesting, right? Because if they actually do delay the upgrade of the floor, because I think they believe it's an upgrade. They just think that in the long term, it might be better to delay it, understand a bit more about the car, and then bring it to the car so they can do some comparisons. There was a discussion in the article that Bogdanovic in FP1 will be running the old floor and Hamilton will be running the new floor. So depending on who you ask, the floor either is coming or it's not. But reportedly, Ferrari aren't sure. I think that's the bottom line. My guess will be that they will bring it to the car. I think that they will bring it. The article from Auto Racer says that they will use it on Hamilton's car in first practice. They will not use it on Dino Boganovic's car, which is Charles Leclerc's car, in first practice. And they will compare and they will contrast and they will decide what they do from there. That to me is the more likely option, but even just the idea that the team are considering delaying what they think is a performance improving upgrade because they've got something to solve is not really a great sign, especially when there were further rumours emerging today on what they consider to be a technical split. Now, Leclerc reportedly, after the end of the Japanese Grand Prix, said, I don't imagine this is a full real quote, but he apparently said, enough, I'm going my own way, with some degree of certainty, to such a degree that it seems like Leclerc isn't very happy with what they are currently doing to fix the issues. The feeling of Vasseur is, and maybe of Hamilton and Serra, is that there is more performance in this car than they are currently experiencing. They believe they can unlock it by fixing the balance, whatever. Leclerc is not so convinced. Leclerc, according to some reports today, believes that the car, this is where the car is, that they can't get it any better than this, and therefore, in order to fix it, he wants to go down a different path to what the team are trying to do. So Leclerc has supposedly told the team, look guys, I am just, I'm going to do this way, and I'm going to go my own way, and, good luck, Lewis, on the other side of the garage. So apparently there's like a technical split in the setup and the development strategy. Leclerc wants to develop in one way, Hamilton and potentially Loic Serra, the actual technical team, want to go in a slightly different way. Look, who's right? Who knows? Leclerc's been at the team for a very long time. He understands Ferrari. He understands how maybe they should develop. Hamilton's pretty new here, but also he does have allies in the team. There's also a question on, well, who's the team leader in this case, right? If Leclerc wants to go this way, or if Hamilton wants to go this way, do they allow both to do their own thing? Or do they say to the guys look, Hamilton's the top man or Leclerc's the top man, and therefore we're going to go this way? Who knows? It just sounds like an absolute shambles, right? We've got two drivers drivers on the team, they both want different directions from the car. It's not like they want different things from the car necessarily. They want the car to be better, but Leclerc believes they can achieve that by going a different way than where they're currently going. So it all sounds like a bit of a nightmare internally there at Ferrari. And yeah, Charles Leclerc reportedly told the leadership, enough, I'll go my own way. The Monegasque believes the SF25 lacks potential and is now pursuing a personal direction in setup, a shift in his alignment with Hamilton. So we'll see. I mean, it could exacerbate the performance differences between the two drivers. It's a super fascinating time for Ferrari, but the bottom line is it ain't looking so good for them winning the championship this year. And if what we said a few minutes ago about the V10 engines is true, in 2026, if Ferrari are pushing hard for V10s or to make it 70-30, 80-20 in terms of ICE and electrical component splits, it's plausible they're not looking so good in 2026 either. So I think many of us thought 25 could be the year. Right now, it does not look like the year. And at some point, if they're really struggling with figuring out what to do with a car and the championships are out of reach, they're going to have to give up. That's just how it's going to be. They're going to have to give up on this year and focus fully on 2026. That may happen at some point. Very much intrigued to your thoughts on all of this stuff in the comment section below. Hit the like button if you enjoyed. Subscribe if you're new. Take care. And I'll see you next time.